Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
It may have been 2+ weeks, but folks, we needed to join you after something marginally positive, but I promise you this podcast will not be that. Good day to everyone in listener land. This is the Real Chili Podcast. I am Brian Henry, and much like the Marquette season has been turned on its head, we will turn this podcast today on its head. I somehow have the hosting duties, and joining me today is the editor-in-chief, the moral compass of the Real Chili Pod, from the District of Columbia, Mr. Mike Lavender. Mike, how are we?
You know, I'm going to save all the positivity for the very front of the podcast here. I'm so honored to be joining you for this maiden voyage of your hosting duties with me on board. I'm happy to bequeath all this to you, and that's all the positive energy I have for the rest of the podcast.
And let's be honest. The only reason why this is happening, and it's being on a text chain with you for the last 2 weeks, has truly been a thrilling experience. I want to say.
Yeah.
Because you are a fairly upbeat individual. You bring positive vibes and joy to most people you come into contact with. That's the scouting report on Mike Lavender. But people in listener land, it has not been a good couple weeks for him. It hasn't. Mike, you are not, despite a thrilling victory tonight against Georgetown, and let's just say in a bubble, it's always good to beat Georgetown. The hell with those guys. Hoya Saxa, shove it up your behinds. Always good to beat Georgetown tonight. But it's hard to be really excited because of what happened on Saturday in Chicago.
Absolutely. When you lose at DePaul in a situation where you're vying for a shot in the NCAA tournament, there's nothing to make your stomach churn like that. And for me, I was watching the Georgetown game tonight, a great win, a 90-86 overtime win for Marquette. But it was a great win only in the game itself. When you take a step back and look at the season, I personally, I had to be dragged onto this podcast by you, Brian. I have personally lost all interest.
Kicking and screaming, I might add. I mean, it was not easy to get you on here today.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that, this is a Marquette team that showed through the non-conference and through the early part of the Big East, showed tremendous promise, and we hit that 4-game skid, and we just haven't looked the same since. I think there's been issues with the ball handling. There's been, obviously, Marcus got hurt. There's been issues with Rousey being able to distribute effectively enough to get others involved. I think, of course, we've seen the emergence of some key role players. Harry Froling, we're going to talk about that, hit a couple of shots. But Hauser, Sakar have definitely stepped up. But this team has not gelled the way a team should have, despite their immaturity throughout the course of the season. And in fact, in some ways, they've regressed.
It begs the question, why? And it's a simple one, and I think every philosophy major out there has had a final exam with why written on the front page and just having to figure it out. That's the question we ultimately ask here, and I'll pose that to you because I think you and I have different takes on this. Why has this group not found that level of consistency? Because I think we'd both agree there's talent here. There are moments, we saw moments in this Georgetown game that they were completely unstoppable offensively, yet they are completely incapable of putting it together for any stretch of games or in a single game for that matter as well. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I agree. I think first off, I totally agree with you that the main problem is the inconsistency. This team...
But what is the root of it? I'm trying to lead you where you want to go here. I know where you want to go.
I think if you're looking at inconsistency, there's one of two options. One, it is player immaturity. And there's certainly a case to be made that this is a very young team. No one's going to argue with that. Arguably our two biggest leaders on the court, at least heading into the season, Marcus Howard and Sam Hauser, sophomores. That is a real thing which cannot be ignored. but I think the extent to which the inconsistency has been present and actually grown throughout the season, there's no other place to direct it than to the coaching. Coaching needs to adapt to the players that they have, immature or not. They need to adapt to the players they have and put them in better positions. Maybe they've done that in certain spots. But to me, you can only blame the players to a certain degree. And yes, they are on the court. They do need to make the plays. But I think there's been questionable decisions throughout. I'm sure we'll talk about Marcus Howard and Andrew Rousey being on the court at the same time. There's a lot of different things. But to me, it comes down to coaching, and I haven't been impressed, particularly down the stretch, with the coaching performance we've seen.
There have been opportunities to capture the excitement and enthusiasm of this fan base and the school community. And at multiple junctures this season, whether it be in a tight home game against Xavier, home games against Villanova, road games, I'll even throw the DePaul game in there. Not that anyone was super excited to watch DePaul play. No one ever is. But a victory in that game keeps your tournament hopes alive. And right. I think after a exciting win against St. John's, where I think they played arguably their most complete game of the year, even without Marcus Howard, the letdown to go into a lifeless DePaul arena, which probably had more Marquette fans in it than Blue Demon fans, and to lay a collective egg like that in the second half,
So you put this on the coaches as well?
It's coach speak when you hear Wojo go up to the podium, I got to be better. I think he's being honest in saying that. Truly, honestly, you've strapped him to a lie detector test. I think he would tell you he hasn't done a very good job this year as a whole. Now, tonight was a real gut check moment. End of the game, I was very impressed with the defense. It's basic basketball 101, but at least he was thinking and getting Howard and Rousey off the court to go offense for defense on some of those possessions. I am not at a point yet where I'm going, gosh, I don't know if he's the guy. I'm not super far away from that, but I haven't gotten to that point. I do think he has philosophies. I think he's been a little stubborn in refusing to play zone this year until until Howard practically broke his hip a few games ago, and they were forced to because they didn't have a choice. And oh my God, they have a miracle comeback. That team came from down 15 points at Creighton, who, by the way, never loses at home.
Right.
And they did it by mixing in zone and man-to-man defense. I know you don't want to play zone, you might hate the principles of it, but oh my God, you got to help yourself out just a little. Look, you probably don't, unless you have the length of Syracuse, you're not taking it to the Final Four, but you still have to use all the tools in the coaching bag. And I think he would agree that, he has had areas he's needed to be better. And this team has reflected that because there have been moments. A year ago, Mike, they stole wins against Xavier and won against Villanova, and that was a difference in pushing them over the line into the NCAA tournament. Now, we lost to St. John's, and we lost another one to DePaul, but we haven't seized the big moments, and we've had some real fall flat on our face moments, and it's the players and the coaches are also culpable as well.
Well, that's an interesting point about last year, because as we were going through last year and we got those big wins against Xavier, I think we went
twice against
4-0 against Xavier and Creighton?
Yes, 4-0. If you want to put Creighton, Xavier, and Villanova in it, we were 5-1 against those three teams.
And I think certainly against Xavier and Creighton last year, we were fortunate of those timely injuries. And at the time, we said, oh, well, you factor that in, but we still won. And looking at it again this year, well, so far at least, we're 1-3 against Xavier and Creighton. We'll see how it shakes out against Creighton. So that's interesting to look back at. But to me, the inconsistencies, I agree with you. It's coaching. It is the players as well. It's as a fan, because that's what I am. That's what we are at the end of the day. It's so maddening to see what this team can be. When they lock down and play defense, whether in a zone or man, although it's much more frequently in a zone than man, it's impressive. They can do it. And similarly on offense, when this team is clicking offensively, and they're getting people involved and moving the ball from side to side, who's going to stop us? And so diagnosing what is stopping that high level of play is really, really difficult because there's not just one factor. But that's what's so frustrating is that you can see glimpses of this team, but I totally agree with you that they've never taken that high level of play and plugged it into the biggest moment and come away with a victory. And maybe part of that is they haven't got the confidence from that to be able to do it again and again. They've never had that big over-the-hump type moment this season. That could be factoring in as well.
The majority of the time on this podcast, we talk about what Marquette can be, what they might be, what we think they should be. And to me, the game against Georgetown was every reason why they're not what we think they should be. Against a very pedestrian Georgetown team who gave a valiant effort. Yep. It took an 18 of 31 night from behind the arc. I hope everyone realized what they were watching. I don't know how long it's going to be until we see them do that again. Yeah. And this is an incredible three-point shooting team. 18 of 31 is stupid. Sam Hauser, 7 of 8. I mean, I do have to say this. Georgetown's perimeter defense, holy crap, Patrick Ewing. Teach a slip screen. Sam Hauser ran to the ball. You know he's not diving to the rim. Of course he's rolling out to the three-point line, yet he'd get open on it every single time. Like, Patrick, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, you got to know that one somewhere. Oh, my Lord. But that was tonight was ridiculous, but it was a prime example. It took that to beat Georgetown.
It took that. They mentioned it during the broadcast that Marquette lit up Georgetown. I think it was 13 for 16 from 3-point in the first time we played. So again, right along with it, 18 of 31 this game. Hauser finished with 28. Rousey finished with 28. Those were the two main producers. Howard finished with 16. Yeah, this is not something we're going to get used to because I think when we lose Rousey next year, you have Howard and you have Hauser. Well, this is veering off into another direction, but I think the ball handler and who that's going to be next year is a major question that I kept thinking about tonight as I was watching Rousey out there run the point. But certainly from a shooting perspective, and we were talking about this right before we got on, what's Hauser's role in the NBA? Can he fit in? And if you're a good enough shooter as he is, you could probably carve yourself out a role. But Hauser, we should mention down in the clutch, right? We would tie ball game with a minute left.
Unbelievable shot.
It wasn't a three, but
shot.
I mean that. I think you said this on the text chain, but it was from the same spot, almost opposite side of the floor, is Novak's buzzer beater over Notre Dame our freshman year.
His Novak's was still a little bit tougher, but the fact that Stam leaned in to create space, fell back out. I mean, that was a really tough shot. And then, of course, everyone just stands around and lets a guy dribble the length of the floor and score a layup at the buzzer to nearly erase what was an incredible shot there to what should have won the game. Look, nevertheless, they got a victory. Again, you swept Georgetown. I don't care that Georgetown's not great. It's always great to beat Georgetown twice because, again, the hell with them. But, Mike, let's wrap it up and look, the season's not over. It's, yes, in all intents and purposes, this team is heading to the NIT. Maybe that's what we should have led with off the top. That was a big victory tonight to help our NIT purposes. But there's still, the Big East tournament still offers a breath of hope. So Saturday is senior day. They will be honoring one senior. It's Andrew Rousey. They are home against Creighton. Do you think this team has enough magic in it to scrape out again, I think Creighton's a better team than we are. They were incredibly fortunate to beat them the last time. Do you think they have it in them to pull it out on Saturday in their final home game of the season?
I do. I do. My expectation is that first senior day, this final game, I think as many fans are, in the same spirit.
Do the fans show up?
That's what I was trying to think of. I think they do. I think this is, particularly first senior day, I understand it's just Andrew Rousey. Not saying we don't love Andrew, but it's just one person. It's not like a whole group of seniors. Right. I think fans do show up. I don't know if it's like to the level of the Villanova game that we attended in January. I think fans do show up. I think we will be able to play with Creighton. I think if we could go there and beat them, I see no reason why we couldn't do it again at home. I think for me, and this is what I would throw to you, I think for me the question is, they were mentioning this on the broadcast, and I don't really give this much credence at all, but they were still saying, there's still a path for Marquette, or Wojo was saying this, there's still a path for Marquette, and my thought is the only path is winning the Big East tournament.
Bids get stolen, remember, all of a sudden, someone comes out of nowhere, steals a bid, that was sixth in in the Atlantic 10 and takes it away from someone who had like Loyola Chicago could earn an at-large bid right now with that. They're 27-5 I think so far this season.
Blurs.
Shout out to Blurs Madness, great podcast for those that aren't listening to it.
Check it out.
Yep, they do an excellent job over there on a terrific season by Loyola basketball. Mm-hmm. But there's an opportunity right there. Someone else could win the Missouri Valley Conference, and all of a sudden now you have two teams out of that league that takes the spot away.
Right.
That happens. So when you're not firmly in, Marquette's not even winning Saturday against Creighton. They're not even on the bubble. It's going to take a win over your first Big East game, and then you've got to basically beat Villanova or Xavier in your second game to then even creep into the conversation. And even then, I still think you're in the conversation. You're not a lock. So I mean, just look at it this way: they need to win. They need to win the Big East tournament. Now this team can shoot the living crap out of the ball. Could a miracle? I don't think it would be a miracle if they won it. It'd be surprising, but they're streaky, and maybe they could put 4 days together. But I don't think any of us are banking on that. And this is my last point, and we'll do a few more pods. But Mike, I would say, and I'm not getting mad yet, but I'd say I've had moments of it, but not enough to go nuts here. I'd just say the word, and it's simple. I have to apply to everything that's happened, especially over the last couple weeks. I would just say I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
I think this team is better than its output. We all knew the margin of error was thin. It's not shocking that they could miss the NCAA tournament. I mean, we thought that was possible. I'm just disappointed that it looks like it's going to play out that way, because I think the talent was there to be a interesting team that somehow fell between a 7 and a 10 or 11 seed and just gave us the weekend there. And unfortunately, it's not you got to earn it, and they haven't earned it.
Well, and it's so disappointing. I agree, because we were salivating early in the season when we saw what Greg Elliott was doing in limited minutes, what Theo John was doing in limited minutes.
Guys have made improvements,
and they've improved.
Agreed.
So you get those additions. They're freshmen. I understand, but to me, what this season, in addition to disappointing, what it's come down to is the balance between Andrew Rousey, Marcus Howard, their offensive output, and how much we can afford to have them on the floor together from a defensive standpoint. And I don't think Wojo, the rest of the coaching staff as well, was ever able to find a balance that worked for this team consistently enough in a tough Big East conference with just that simple issue: Rousey and Howard, defense and offense combined, that was ever able to work. And to me, that's what the season came down to. I think that's as much on the coaching staff as it is on Rousey and Howard. But that's a disappointing note, because I think we all had higher hopes for this season. But that's why you play the games. And I don't know if we podcast if we make it to the NIT. That's my question for you. If we make it to the NIT, are we going to podcast?
We'll play it by ear. We don't want to make any commitments, but the people need they may need a therapy session if this team is playing early in the NIT, and
we'll get a Twitter poll up.
I say we open up the Twitter inbox. We can let people have their therapies, because quite honestly, we've needed a little bit of therapy over the last couple of weeks.
That's true.
Watching what we have seen. Well, that is it for again this upside down edition of the Real Chili Podcast. For the editor-in-chief, Mike Lavender, I am Brian Henry. Marquette's back in action on Saturday against Creighton. We'll talk to you after that one. Will anything matter if they win? Yeah, probably not. But hey, we'll be here anyways, because shit, we got nothing better to do. Thanks for listening, everybody.